A brand of notebook that has been making waves internationally of late is the Chromebook from Google, except that Google doesn't make the Chromebook. It's made by a range of manufacturers, such as Acer, which is bringing them into South Africa for the first time. Their Chromebooks range from 11-inch to about 13.5-inch devices. Their pricing has been from about $199 up to about $290. Last year, the total number of Chromebooks sold internationally was about 5 million, mostly to schools and governments. In South Africa, those are expected to be two of the key markets, along with the corporate market. The exciting thing about the Chromebook, and this is the Acer C720p, is that there are thousands of apps available for it. Just as in the Google Play Store, you also have an app store for the Chromebook. This is an 11.5-inch touchscreen device, and that's the other exciting thing about Chromebooks. Because the software doesn't cost too much to have adapted for the devices, they can go a little bit higher on the specs, like having a touchscreen instead of simply having your standard screen that is controlled via keyboard. This particular one has got an incredibly fast boot time. It advertises a 7-second boot time. My tests have taken it down to 5 seconds. And that's really wonderful for anyone who wants to get going immediately. Probably what will really appeal to people is 7.5 hours battery life. And then if you have decent connectivity, you're going to appreciate the fact that you get 100 gigabytes of storage on Google Drive. But of course, it does come down to that connectivity. And a Chromebook is a connected device. So if you don't have decent bandwidth, then you should rather give it a miss for now. But that bandwidth is coming, and the environments in which you're able to use it are increasing rapidly. I've got with me in the studio David Drummond, the Acer Vice President for Middle East and Africa, to tell us a little about the Chromebook strategy. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Arthur.
Please tell us what is Acer's strategy with Chromebooks in South Africa?
Okay, Acer's strategy globally has been a dual-pronged one, initially for government and education users, and then more recently for consumers in general with a retail strategy. In South Africa, we've followed the same strategy, which is first of all to launch for education and business users. And there we've had some very good success in the university sector, particularly with these units. And the key reason for marketing these initially to government, education, university and business is that we like to ensure, as you mentioned earlier, really good connectivity in the environment so that the end user has a really first-class experience.
Tell us a little about the App Store approach, or rather the availability of apps through the Google services?
Sure. The apps are available through Google services. As you mentioned, you can go online, download apps, pay for them. But there is also Google Platinum partners in South Africa. So where people are using the Chromebook for enterprise-wide applications, they can purchase the enterprise apps and the control panel that's required to control all the Chromebooks on the network, give some type of security and management across the network. And those are distributed by Sahara Systems in South Africa.
Okay. What is the educational strategy then, especially with regard to apps and the cost of those apps?
Sure. I mean, this is really your always-on, always connected device. And in terms of the applications, it's more the price point that people are used to paying on their phone for an app, rather than the price point that people are used to paying on their PC for an application. So we're sort of talking from free to a few tens of rands, rather than sort of starting with a few hundreds of rands and up to a few thousand.
Well, you mentioned the control panel in the enterprise environment. In the schools environment, that management of the devices becomes even more important.
Yes,
what is
indeed.
Acer doing in that area?
We're working closely with Google in South Africa on the control panel and on the way that these units are deployed in schools, so that we can have some broad access from the machines, but appropriate access from the machines for the students and end users.
And David, you recently took over as Vice President of Acer for the Middle East and Africa region as a whole.
Yes.
How do you see this panning out across Africa?
Well, in fact, we see South Africa as the first country where we will extend access to the retail sector for the Chromebook later in the year. And here we're in discussions to have a 4G bundle with one of the leading telcos in South Africa. As I mentioned earlier, and as I think you mentioned, connectivity is absolutely key with the Chromebook. There is some offline capability, but the whole philosophy and strategy of the Chromebook is as an always-on, always-connected device. You mentioned the 5-second boot time, and this is really positioned slightly differently to a PC or to a netbook. So again, as with the schools and universities, we want to make sure that there's really first-class bandwidth available for end users so that they have a really good experience right out of the box.
How will you address that particular challenge across Africa as you roll it out in other countries?
Across Africa, we're following the same strategy as South Africa, the same strategy as globally. That is, we're looking for these typical campus environments where bandwidth can be guaranteed and where, in fact, Google even gets involved to improve the bandwidth within the campus so that the end user experience is really good.
So that adds up to a fairly exciting future for Acer in education?
Yes, I think so. I mean, we've been very strong in education in South Africa, both in the universities and in the schools, but this gives us another string to our bow. And it's also an area where we have a very dominant market share, around 40% market share worldwide for Chromebooks. So we really are first to market with this unit in South Africa and coming from a very strong global position.
Thanks, David. Another string to Acer's bow, and also another option in both the business and the educational environment, the Acer Chromebook.